Hi, I'm Mike Pearce from Climate Group. We're here for a special edition of 50 Shades of Green, coming from the heart of London Climate Action Week. It's Wednesday and it's a very hot Wednesday in London. We're halfway through the week. That means we've had probably hundreds of meetings already, thousands, tens of thousands of conversations have happened, and that means it's a time of a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of opportunities for collaboration. That's why we're delighted to be here with the energy efficiency movement, in particular with Mike Umika, the Managing Director. Energy efficiency, Mike, is one of those challenges that we at the Climate Group have been wrestling with how to build its profile. I mean, I'm interested to know what you're hearing at London Climate Action Week and how you're thinking about this challenge.
Yeah, thanks as well for having us here and doing really this joint collaboration. I think that's already a great path forward to showcase no organization can do it anymore alone. So we have to do this joint collaboration with the joint vision that we're also aiming for, and connecting the dots to the London Climate Action Week. I think a lot is around resilience and around electrification. And I think the most important lever in that one, in the equation, is really energy efficiency. Because you cannot just scale one if you don't reduce also the demand side. And that's what we have seen also from the IEA over the last years. The average energy efficiency progress rate is only between 1.4 to 1.8% since 2019. And we have to double, actually. We have to go to 4%. And it's not just the energy crisis that is now the challenge. It's just it changed the urgency. And I think that's really an opportunity as well to showcase these collaboration and really bring also energy efficiency to the discussion plate and really make electrification the result of what we are currently experiencing at the moment.
So, for our discussion here today on energy efficiency as part of London Climate Action Week, we have a great mix of perspectives from business, finance and policy, and with experience from that from many parts of the world, which we'll be able to cover in the discussion today. Joining me today are Erica Gupta, the Head of Sustainability at Siemens Financial Services, Anna Troncoso, Global Head of Strategy, Business Development Sustainability in the Motion Business Area of ABB, Emma Harvey-Smith, Managing Director of Partnerships at the Green Finance Institute, and lastly, Chris Skidmore, Chair of Climate Action Coalition and former UK Energy and Clean Growth Minister. Thank you to all four of you for joining us for this conversation. Erica, let's kick this off. There's a growing focus at the moment on how we scale electrification. I was at one of the events yesterday and we had the IEA championing this talk. We had the UK government talking about the pace of electrification being critical. There was the launch of a campaign, Electrify Now, which had businesses and governments behind this momentum, and We Mean Business Coalition was talking around its Electric Advantage programme. So electrification seemed to be the topic of the day. We heard less about energy efficiency specifically in that debate, despite, I'm sure this group can talk more about this, the many arguments around this as being a critical, cost-effective lever in the transition. So I was curious to perhaps to kick things off by your views on what's preventing this strong business case for efficiency from translating into large real-scale deployment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we are hearing so much about electrification, and I think it's really critical to think that in order to meet the growing load that electrification provides, we need to talk about efficient electrification. And efficiency is one of the first measures that we can take to really enable resilience as well. So it's not just about reducing our costs, it's also ensuring our operations into the future. It's helping secure the grid by lowering the demand on it. And we're hearing so much about the demand on the grid. One of the barriers we're really seeing is that a lot of these projects require upfront capital, and they often have slightly longer payback terms than most companies may be willing to accept. So if they're looking for a 5-year payback, and we're looking at projects that take 10, that can be very challenging to get the companies to actually provide the financing. And if we look to the financiers to provide the financing, these are often much smaller projects and not necessarily something that they want to engage in. So looking at how do we scale these projects would really help.
Excellent. Well, I think we've also going to come with some finance voice around how this is working later in the conversation. We can dig into that a little bit more. Anna, on a sort of similar sort of question, I'd be to get your perspective on Energy efficiency, as we heard, often talked about as the first fuel. This is the thing surely we must be doing to move this agenda more quickly. The economics are clear, and we've heard more than just economics here. We've heard some wider benefits around efficiency, resilience, etc. as part of this story. From your perspective, what's holding things back at the moment?
Yes, and I like what you said, Emma, that it's not happening at scale. I mean, energy efficiency is one of the fastest and most cost-effective way of improving productivity and competitiveness. It shows short paybacks. The technology already exists. The issue that we see is that it's happened in small and isolated business cases, and it is still seen as a technical improvement rather than a financial one. For example, if we take motor-driven systems, 45% of electricity demand runs through motors, continuous operations. There's a huge opportunity to optimize those systems. We recently issued a study that shows that improving only 0.2% in motor-driven efficiency can help save globally between $9 and $12 billion. And this is with very short return on investment, just months, with the right technology. So the technology exists. The challenge, as Emma suggested, is adoption at pace.
And are there any particular barriers that either of you are finding to telling a story of where that scale can come from?
Because it's happening in isolated small cases, you don't have the visibility to investors. And we spend a lot of time in ABB working with industry, with industrial customers, to do energy efficiency assessments to show them the impact between replacing one part of the system or the entire part of the system, and how basically when you aggregate the energy efficiency returns at system level, it can be transformational for industries. But again, it's educating and showing the impact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just on that, maybe Erica as well, is there something around how the value chain is moved along, how companies are working and collaborating together to solve some of that scale problem that you might have views on?
Yes, so one thing that we're really looking at is how do you unlock that capital that's needed for the initial investment. So for us, Siemens Financial Services, we're offering efficiency as a service or decarbonization as a service, and that allows us to make larger projects that take on a larger challenge and also deliver more impact, but perhaps take a bit longer to pay back. So an example of that would be the work we did with University of Birmingham. It's a 10-year relationship that we've developed with them to deliver efficiency, building efficiency as a service across their campus. And similarly, we've also worked with University of Kent. So we're offering decarbonization as a service there, that the first step is energy efficiency. It's always energy efficiency. It's the most cost-effective measure that we can take. So really looking at ways where we provide a larger project without that upfront cost as a barrier.
I can give another customer example. In Europe, it's a copper producer and recycler. So initially they started with, they had more than 500 motors across their manufacturing facilities. They started with the replacement of only one or two. They weren't convinced about the return on investment. When they realized, and we showed them the efficiency in terms of upgrading all of the motors, the return on investment went from years to just 4 months. They replaced the entire over 500 motors. So we have examples like this all over the world.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, there's a fascinating piece here certainly around how we can tell these stories better and to more people. It feels like it's a big awareness-raising challenge. This podcast is a good example, but let's do more of these stories to show this is possible to really transform the economics of that. Very interesting. We're going to connect more into this story on finance and moving capital here. I'm delighted, Emma, you're joining us on this. So Green Finance Institute, obviously thinking around how to get money flowing into projects on the ground. I guess the hypothesis a bit behind today is that energy efficiency, which we were saying here it is, it's critical, is relatively underfunded. The investment seems challenging and a bit fragmented. And I guess maybe to start with, interested to get your perspective on what's really going on. Is there enough money, and that is just it's not being deployed, or is it the people are funding the wrong things? What's happening here at the moment?
Great question, and I think you've got to look at the numbers to see what is happening. So Bloomberg New Energy Finance published their latest report looking at investment into clean energy. $2.3 trillion went into clean investments last year, and of that, only $84 billion went into electrified heat. So we really are not seeing investment at the level that we need. We know that the target set at COP28 for 4% and energy efficiency are not being met. I think last year the IEA indicated that energy efficiency was at 1.8% of growth. So we aren't seeing the investment needed. And it's due to a number of the factors that my fellow panelists have just outlined. These are quite often small, fragmented projects, which are very hard for financial institutions to look at and see as investable opportunities. We need to see these projects being aggregated. We need to see these system-wide, holistic approaches so that we can aggregate projects that are homogenous and similar into portfolios that can be invested into. But I would say as well, there is a real challenge in terms of the traditional finance that we have available, not really addressing the challenges of retrofit. Retrofit and energy efficiency, as Erica alluded to, it can have long payback periods, and very often you can see changes of ownership of properties or of facilities during that time. So a number of property owners will be and corporates will be disincentivized from investing into energy efficiency if they don't think they're going to see all of the utility bill savings and the resiliency benefits. So I would love to talk actually about a solution that can help to overcome that. One is energy as a service, which is very important. But another solution I'd mention is based on the US Property Assessed Clean Energy or PACE financing model. We call it Property Linked Finance in the UK, which can fund up to 100% of the upfront costs of an energy efficiency project. It will then spread the repayments of that finance over the useful lifetime of that technology. So you've then got affordable, stretched out payments. But it has another really unique factor, which is that the finance runs with the property. And what that means in reality is if you are the original property owner and you are repaying that finance and benefiting from a more energy efficient and resilient building, if you come to sell that property, once that's sold, you are no longer responsible for that finance. The incoming property owner takes up those repayment obligations and they will repay that finance, but they are also benefiting from those energy efficiency measures. So it links the benefit of these measures and these projects to who is responsible for the repayments, and that's crucial. It's mobilized $20 billion in the US already, and in fact of that, $3 billion has gone towards resilience improvements, and we should see the first deal close in the UK this year for property linked finance.
Just wanted to add, being from the US, I've seen that program work really well, and I've even heard commercial business owners talk about how it actually increased the value of their building by having that.
What do you think helped to get that off the ground? I mean, obviously there's a lot of financial sector expertise in US and UK. We're here in London at the moment. That's probably a place you can imagine that flourishing. So maybe what happened, and is that model then translatable beyond geographies with those very mature financial markets?
Absolutely. So this market is already existing in the US, in Canada and in Australia. And the Green Finance Institute is building this market in the UK and Spain. What we've seen again and again, though, is it takes 5 to 6 years to be even able to get the first deal over the line. And then it takes a number of years for this market to get traction. Now in the US, we're seeing 2 billion, 3 billion of origination every year, so it scales. So what is important? Well, we need a way to be able to draw on those collective lessons of what's happened in the US, what's happened in the UK. We, the Green Finance Institute, along with the Climate Bonds Initiative, have launched the Global Property Linked Finance Initiative, an initiative that is trying to really short circuit and really accelerate the development of property linked finance. What's needed, you asked? You've got to do the legal analysis to work out how can you physically and structurally and legally link finance to a property, and there's multiple different ways to do that. You then need to engage with the finance sector and with property owners to get them familiar with this solution. You need to really design the product so that incumbent financiers are comfortable with it, because on a technical aspect, this is a super senior form of finance. It ranks ahead of mortgages. That makes it very cost competitive. So you've got to prime the market for that. And then thirdly, you need to work closely with government because they are often a key enabler for PLF or PACE to scale. So being able to work hand in glove with governments to be able to introduce that enabling legislation to give that confidence in the solution is important. So that is exactly what we're doing in the Global Property Linked Finance Initiative, is we're looking at what other markets globally could this work and how can we really rapidly accelerate this out and build PLF into an asset class that institutional investors are comfortable with.
Can I add one more? So just similarly, for industrial upgrades, we've been introducing retrofit as a service. So the way that we've had energy as a service or efficiency as a service, we're now offering retrofit as a service that we can help in really create these upgrades in the industrial space as well.
Yeah, and you're matching the repayments to the benefits, which is so important. It's not just viewed as a one-off upfront capex, but there's benefits sort of attributed over time.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful to hear more about the detail of that. And I'm excited to see actually the growth of that for other markets, because it feels like we can easily get stuck in some of our London Climate Week or New York Climate Week with the big picture and making this a global conversation. Chris, London Climate Action Week is full of ambition. I quite like that. I think it's good that we see visibility of business and government leaders saying this stuff matters and showing they're really determined. But I think there is a gap which is being acknowledged. We need to move to an action agenda. There's a gap between the ambition and the delivery. One of the key areas which is always mentioned is around policy. There was a survey which Women Business, Global Renewables and Alliance produced yesterday, which was talking about how important business leaders are seeing policy in solving this problem. So this clearly is a critical part of that. I was keen to get from your sense, you've heard some of the voices here talking about what seems to be like a thing we can surely move faster. It's clearly there's some technological, not technology challenges, but innovation challenges around doing that. From your perspective, what's at the core of why this hasn't happened? You also said time and government driving this forward yourself. What's blocked it?
Well, I think ambition is fantastic. Opportunities to demonstrate how efficiency can lead to greater margins for businesses are all superb. But as Emma said, it's not shifting the dial. And it's well known from several studies now that the most effective way to deliver policy, I think from a study of 2,000 policy initiatives globally, is mandates. That is what will deliver the certainty, the clarity that business needs, but also a recognition that this has to happen. And that's across a number of spaces. So you could have on the commercial side energy efficiency requirements that should be delivered. When I did my net zero review for the UK government, the commercial sector can move first. And I've always sort of felt there's tax incentives already built into the energy efficiency measures for buildings that they can use, that they can then be the test bed for demonstrating where efficiency can sort of really go for the future. But then also, with the mandates, some of the data collection at the moment isn't fit for purpose to be able to actually show that energy efficiency is having an effect. So one thing we have in the UK are these energy performance certificates called EPCs. And the plan was that every house, when it came up for a mortgage, would have an energy performance certificate. The challenge is if you take some energy efficiency measures, like putting in an electric heat pump in, which is 4 times more efficient than a gas boiler, your EPC goes backwards. So when people are buying a house, they sort of think, "Oh, this has got a lower ranking. This must be a less efficient house." It's not true. It's actually the data is not fit for purpose. So that's all being redesigned at the moment. So I'd say mandates are important. Also, from an industrial perspective, the emissions trading scheme, is working. The compliance market is something that Asia is steaming ahead with. I think we've now got sort of 60% of all emissions under some form of sort of compliance market because of Asia's involvement in this. And that's where building efficiency is the low-hanging fruit of the ETS schemes that are being developed. And just to give one example of this, the other thing is around education, because you've got to be able to make sure that when you look at the fragmentation, part of that is down to sort of having SMEs and a long tail of businesses that haven't got the capability. And one story I heard was actually there was a kiln making business, a ceramic business, and they had 4 kilns. They took on an intern who just left university. They said, "Right, okay, you think you're so smart. Why don't you look at how you can save us money?" And he came back 24 hours later and worked out that one of their kilns, their oldest kiln, was the least efficient, and they were leaving it on all the time. And he was able to quickly develop a piece of software which meant that it was able to be switched on and off at the right time, and it was going to save them £3 million a year. And this was, 21-year-old straight out of university was able to teach this business. And there must be stories, across the world like this, where we are just seeing old, inefficient machinery, equipment that is just running, and no one's really sort of taken account of this. And that's also the narrative around efficiency that's really important, is that this isn't about necessarily looking for emission savings, it's obviously looking for cost savings. You're going to have to do this anyway. You're going to have to replace the old with the new. Modernisation will happen. Everything that is modernised by default is usually more efficient, whether it's dishwashers, whether it's sort of tumble dryers, washing machines, they've all ended up your LED lighting that we've got here. 10 years ago, that we probably wouldn't have had these LEDs on our faces. It would have been some inefficient light bulb. The case has been made in so many other sectors, and we just need to recognise that it's actually a sort of quite unremarkable, unsexy sort of process. But actually, as you said, it's the first fuel has the greatest gains to be made.
I guess hear from that, there's quite an important point of competitiveness or economic competitiveness for different geographies and being able to lead on this space, both with the development of technology and the implementation of that in economy. Given this, you've said there is a real economic opportunity for businesses within countries to win. I guess AI feels to me, you're a guy who's solved the kiln problem, but I guess the ability to do that at scale and pace.
And demography.
New solutions.
Demography is also really important. So, I think the World Business Council always said, when you look at sort of buildings in the sort of global north, 80% of buildings will still be here 2050. 80% of buildings in the global south need to be built potentially to cope for some of those sort of growing populations. And then with that, obviously, we're in London Climate Week, it's particularly hot in the UK. Everyone's now talking about resilience and risk as one of the sort of core messages rather than just net zero. When it comes to global cooling, lots of focus also here on AI and the energy use of data centres, how we need to make them more efficient, and that's a great narrative. But that's a fragment of the energy that's going to be used when it comes to air conditioning. And actually, the air conditioning and the cooling challenge, if we address the energy efficiency that is required through either buildings use, which means you need less energy, air conditioning, or actually the use of AI to be able to regulate when air conditioning is used, there are massive gains to be had and potential gains that are only going to grow over time.
May I add, we're showing those gains every day to liquid cooling for data centers, for example. And I would like to use your kiln and story and even analogy. Those are all motor-driven systems that run continuously by adding a drive. So a drive is a computer that tells things when to stop and start and when to cool rather than working continuously. So we see that every day. HVAC systems, air conditionings, most of the installed base globally is all technology that is consuming 100 times more energy than they should be doing. Again, the technology already exists to introduce that energy efficiency and cut costs significantly, improve competitiveness.
No, I was interested you mentioned the air conditioning, Chris. IEA were talking yesterday of 3 big trends, and this was number one, and the message was very strongly, don't try and, this may seem scary from a climate standpoint, don't try and stop this. This is a vital bit. This is going to grow. The number of countries where the percentage of air conditioning units is tiny at the moment. This, it's enormous already, and it's going, the colleague from Nigeria who's speaking, this is going to become immense. So the question is, how can we use that and the efficiency we need to be able to better human lives? And I suppose the other nice part of the policy piece on this is the efficiency and indeed the electrification are good narratives to be able to talk about the value that's created. So it isn't solely a climate story. So we're talking about better lives, and the efficiency can be useful ways into that.
One of the more, I'd say, innovative approaches to that with air conditioning is inside those units, they're including energy storage, so that you can then help spread the peak demand on the electric grid, which is what's causing the greatest amount of cost and over-design, right? So anything we can do to spread when the peak demand occurs, and air conditioning is a perfect example of that, and including also, as you mentioned, the energy management systems, whether they're controlling your process or your building, really designing them to look at how do I smooth the load. So how do I reduce the load? Yes, but also how do I smooth the load to reduce my demand at the highest rate points during the day and when the grid is most stressed.
Just to actually add to that point, I mean, it's also a political one because there's a bit of pushback on renewables, on wind in the States and also in the UK. We've lost that cross-party consensus. But we have enough renewables on the grid that making the renewables themselves more efficient to be able to deliver. Now, whether that's at a household level, It's really interesting to see sort of, actually when the polling, even of like people on the far Reform and other Republicans, really interested to see they want to make their money go further, but also, to stop curtailments, issues around sort of, battery storage, is how to link the battery narrative with an efficiency narrative, but sometimes they're sort of seen as different. So we have this energy efficiency, target, but, what's the more granular approach to sort of saying, well, every home should have a battery? We have this like heat pump target in the UK. I think it's like 600,000 heat pumps by, it was meant to be 2028, we're not going to make it, but there's no target on how many homes should have a battery. And yet in the UK, there's 2 million homes with solar panels on their roofs, but only 400,000 of them are actually making the solar efficient by having it sort of wired up to a battery as well to do what you were saying.
Yeah, and it could also be thermal energy storage in these homes and these buildings, not necessarily electrical. It might not be a battery. In the US, we've seen a lot of these ice chillers where they run the ice chillers, they make ice at night, and it reduces the air conditioning load during the day. So it helps smooth demand and lower the cost for operating the building.
But the interesting point here is these are all amazing innovations, but actually many households wouldn't be aware of the benefits that these are going to deliver. So there is a huge part of this is around consumer education. Who are the right people to do that? We're seeing obviously a number of energy companies coming forward because they can see where the future trajectory is going. You're seeing local authorities and municipalities playing an important role. But we're also seeing the finance community trying to work out how they can step up. They know that they're not going to go and advise individual customers on how they can improve energy efficiency, but they can bring this into conversations at right trigger points when someone is renewing their mortgage or buying a home. We're starting to see mortgage brokers being upskilled through certificates so they can say, actually, right, you're a private rented landlord, you're buying a new private rented property. Do you realise you have to improve this to an EPC X by X date? So again, these small nudge factors that can just land this message in the psyche are incredibly important as well.
I think that's an excellent point. At the industrial level, we see more and more partnership early on projects with regulators, financial companies, and technology companies such as ourselves. Data center segment is an example. We've been working over the last 2 years, 3 years even, these projects are being built with the regulator, the utility company, the data center operator, and ourselves on how to build this in a sustainable and energy efficient manner. So that's the way new infrastructure, data center infrastructure is being built in the US, and existing infrastructure in Europe, up to 20% of the installed infrastructure in data centers is significantly inefficient. So there's a lot of opportunity using the technologies that were mentioned before to improve efficiency.
Causes for optimism, I'm hearing. There is on this, there really is. We'll draw to the sort of closing section of this piece, and I'd like to, in a sense, be very open about what might be something you'd like to reflect on. It may be something you've heard from colleagues or something else that's gone in the week. But also within that, where you are seeing opportunity for yourselves within your own domains and areas of work to be able to accelerate energy efficiency. Because I think things are moving, but we know that it's not fast enough. So what are the ways that we can each drive that faster within and through our networks? Erica, maybe kick off with you.
So for us, we work very closely with Siemens, of course, overall. So really for us, it's working with Siemens to deliver energy performance contracts or services, energy management systems. So whether it's decarbonization as a service or electrification as a service or efficiency as a service, it's really ensuring that we're developing not just the technology and solutions, but the financing to go alongside that, and looking for partners that will also help with financing portfolios of these projects. We're a small bank. We're not even a bank in all parts of the world, so we're very small and we need others involved.
Yeah, no, that value chain sounds right.
Yes, so we are an electrification company, so the technology already exists. So I would echo, we seek more and more partnering across the value chain to enable delivering those solutions to industry and to customers all over the world. We help increase productivity by lowering operating costs significantly. It's proven, it can be done.
I'd say use resilience as the Trojan horse. It's very much the theme of London Climate Action Week this year, and obviously added to by the rather tropical temperatures outside. Being able to use resilience, talking about cooling, talking about also something we haven't talked about today, but flood resilience as well, is almost a Trojan horse to then start having the conversation around electrification as well. And it's also the sort of similar factors go for engaging the finance community on this topic. They can see that some of their book might literally be underwater. So alongside that, how can you start to bring in electrification when speaking with financial institutions as they're looking at the risks inherent in their portfolios?
Just a thought follow-up on that. Like, as we've been talking about resilience and looking at where are the potential economic losses from climate change, number one is actually from heat stress and extreme heat. So the need for these cooling systems and very efficient cooling systems, and to your point that this is to prevent economic losses, really, these efficiencies and improvements in cooling technology.
No, I mean, very much. I know the number of colleagues I've spoken to just through the door here who are talking about their days being disrupted today by UK schools being closed either midday or entirely this week. It's very significant at the scale. Chris?
So, this is London Climate Week. On Monday, I had a report that was launched. I published a report with former UNFCCC Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa on net benefit AI, opening opportunities and scaling solutions. And obviously one of the huge opportunities that wasn't around maybe sort of 3-4 years ago is for AI to prove its worth. Obviously the focus has been on the sort of energy, electricity cost of AI for the future and sort of rising sort of demand. We're seeing sort of potential energy use in America sort of overall double by sort of 2050. But AI needs to demonstrate that it can provide the solutions, but these shouldn't be anecdotal. But AI doesn't necessarily want the regulation to go with that. But I think the baselining opportunity is absolutely critical here. We've got to be able to ensure that countries and companies are willing to collect the data to then demonstrate the shift that can happen. So we've sort of called for the global stock take process that the UNFCCC takes forward. It's going to begin again in November for the next round of national determined contributions that will then go for 2035 and beyond. The last series of this, AI wasn't even included, and I think there's a really strong case for saying to countries, demonstrate what you can do to improve efficiencies and productivities using AI as a tool. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, someone mentioned AI is a bit like a scalpel. In a surgeon's hand, it can save lives. In a bad actor's hand, it can damage and kill people. And so, making sure we can show to other countries, and it comes down to that capability point, that many countries don't have that capability to use AI at the moment to be able to generate efficiency and productivity savings. But everyone should have that opportunity. And if we can demonstrate in other countries how they can build that capability and use AI for good, I know the UN's got a conference in July on this as well. It's really important that we make the case rather than just seeing it as a threat.
And I mean, I think that issue around ensuring the social legitimacy as it will scale, is going to be increasingly important for the businesses that are heart of that and that are using a lot of this as well. And needing to demonstrate it will become a big part of their emissions.
Yeah, and digital twinning, opportunities to be able to, there's a huge education piece, but also efficiency using AI is a massive issue. The UN published a report that came out, I think, sort of earlier this month, which showed that the abuse of AI at the moment, people are using large language models when they should be using small language models. Actually, they don't need to be using as much energy. Everyone's going on Claude thinking, I can go on this to produce a picture and stuff. It's like, that education piece needs to happen now, otherwise we're just having a new form of inefficiency being embedded into society.
Yeah. Thank you all. What a great discussion, and because of that richness, I am not going to take the foolish task of attempting to summarise that, and you wouldn't want to hear it all again. But I suppose, let me just pick on a couple of things. I think it was an important message, Chris, that you made. The gap is real. We can't pretend this is not a topic we need to solve around this part. So this is a really significant bit of the climate challenge which needs to be sorted, and that we're not shifting the dial at the moment at the pace we need to. So how can we, as part of this community, do that very significantly? The gap is not one of ambition, it's not one of technology existing, though there's always technological improvement to make that better, but it is an execution problem. And here we came to several of the comments which came through, which were around, what does it come through? Erica, I think you talk about scale, and so how do we make these projects work? And then Emma and Anna, we talked about, what are the bits that you need to make that work? The legal, the finance, the work with government. This is the work across businesses in the value chain. This must be a collaboration to solve it if we're to reach the scale, because there are so many SMEs that are going to be, you can't just add up, that need to solve this. So this tells us a story of collaboration. This is a really key message for this week, and I think a really strong part that's come through on that. We are, of course, delighted to be collaborating with the energy efficiency movement here, Climate Group, working with our Smart Energy Coalition, partnering with us on this podcast. That's been a delight to do that. We'll look forward to working with them and connecting with all of you and many others as we take forward the work on this topic over the coming months. And we hope, of course, to see many people in September at Climate Week NYC as we carry on the conversation amongst this big and growing community. Thank you again and very much for that conversation today.